Hello there, Mr. K here, the mediocre painter, and I've been painting miniatures for 32 years, I think, and messing around with Wargames, and I've hoping to do some useful YouTube videos for you all, especially for the beginner, because I want to make sure that I can pass on what I've learned so that you don't make the mistakes that I have, because at the end of the day I've made the mistakes so you don't have to. So today I'm going to talk about stripping miniatures. I did a previous video where I was talking about what miniatures you should look to buy when you first start as a beginner so that you can effectively build up your skills and practice. And it should be up there somewhere. Yes, there. Yes, that's right. Now, you'll probably find when you do this that maybe assembled painted miniatures are all you can find, and so you're going to have to strip them. So how do you actually go about stripping them? There are lots of YouTube videos and such out there about what you use to strip them. I'm going to talk to you about a two-step process that I use to strip metal miniatures, and I'll talk about stripping plastic and resin miniatures as well. So I recently purchased actually some miniatures off eBay. I purchased not that long ago a sort of old Imperial Guard model, sort of a Thunder Warrior type, on eBay, and I was looking for something interesting for an Inquisitor team, so I was looking for kind of old models and stuff just to give it a bit of character. I wanted each person in it to be a bit different. And that guy stripped up pretty well, as you can see between the eBay shot and the current strip. Well, current shot, he actually stripped out pretty well. There's still a few little spots there, here and there, because I haven't used the second step on this miniature yet, which I'll talk about more later. But I also bought some Space Marine heroes from Poland that were also very, very badly painted indeed, and needed to be stripped. I was really after this Marnius Calgar model, which actually stripped really, really well. I'm really pleased with how he stripped. He was absolutely superb. That's what I was really after, but I actually got two more models for the price of one, if you will. And I got this Apothecary. And on the Apothecary, you'll notice, as this is being shown to you, that around his reductor in his hand, it didn't strip too well. And I'll talk a little bit about why that might actually be the case and whether you can actually do something about it. And the last one is this Space Marine Captain. And you'll also notice on the Space Marine Captain we have a similar kind of problem. There's a couple of spots in there that, you know, stuff didn't strip out too good. I'll sort of explain why that might be the case. So I'm a chemist by trade, so I know a little bit about solvents, and your go-to solvent when you're a chemist at university is acetone. Now, you mere mortals out there would probably recognise that as nail polish remover or nail varnish remover. So could you use acetone to strip your miniatures? Metal miniatures, probably so, but acetone's pretty harsh stuff, and it's fairly difficult to get hold of in reasonable quantities. And also, what you'll find with acetone is, once you've used it, it's gone, basically. You use it on the minute to strip it, it'll take all the paint off with it, because it'll dissolve it, and then basically you won't be able to reuse the acetone. So what you want is something that's a little bit milder and easier to use, and also cheaper and readily available, and that stuff is Methylated Spirits. So this is a brand called Tetrion. You can find this in most hardware stores. Probably something like this is a couple of pounds or something like that. So how do you actually use it? So basically take a glass jar, something like this, with the lid, and pour your methylated spirits, maybe up to halfway. Take the bases off your metal miniatures and drop them in, and let them soak overnight. I like to let them soak overnight because it just makes the whole thing easier. Come back the following day, take them out, give them a scrub with a toothbrush. That'll get an awful lot of it off. What methylated spirits does is it softens the acrylic, and so that it'll actually literally scrub off. Now you won't get it all off in one go, most likely. You'll get a good deal of it off, but by scrubbing it with the with the brush, you'll agitate the other areas. It'll then soak in more when you put it in for your second soak. You'll then basically drop it in again, let it soak again overnight, come back the following day, scrub again with your toothbrush, and boom, you'll have a miniature that is pretty nicely done and nicely stripped. Now, there will be some more stubborn bits that won't quite come off. And why is that? Well, it's often where you actually put the super glue, and so effectively there's super glue there, and so the paint's bonded to the super glue. You can try and use a little bit of acetone with a Q-tip to try and get rid of that stuff in some areas, and on metal miniatures you can safely do that, you'll be fine. But if you did that on a plastic miniature, you're toast. You will soften the miniature and possibly wreck it, so don't do that on a plastic miniature. But I find also you get scenarios where just for some bizarre reason the paint just won't come off a particular thing. There doesn't seem to be like an area where there was a join or whatever. It's just not having it. It just won't come out. And in those circumstances, I find something like this is really good. So this is cellulose thinners. This is Rustin's cellulose thinners. This is, you know, quite expensive stuff. It's about £7. A small bottle like this, and also when you use it, that's it, it's gone, because it basically, you know, dissolves the actual paint. But you don't need an awful lot in those stubborn circumstances. All you need to do is take your toothbrush, stick it in there, scrub it on the mini, let it stand for a little bit, and then scrub it again. And basically that should get rid of the last little bits that are really stubborn in terms of wanting to come off. Now you may find with some of the older miniatures they actually use a different kind of primer. They use like a smelly primer, which is something you can't get these days. It used to be made with fish oil, and that stuff really sticks to the miniature. It's a fantastic primer, but it's actually quite difficult to get off. And so often, a lot of times, you'll see with people stripping minis, they've got these little white lines in the corners and things like that, and they're like, I just can't get this stuff off and I don't know why, and that's probably because it was smelly primer. The Rustin stuff can get that stuff off, so that is, you know, a good tip there. So a two-step process essentially. You know, use the methylated spirits, let it soak, scrub, let it soak again, scrub, and then a little bit of that old Rustin's to get maybe the last little bits and pieces off if you've got a little bit of trouble. The beauty of methylated spirits is you can reuse it, because it doesn't actually dissolve the paint at all. So cheap, and you can reuse it. So what you'll find is you'll probably need to filter off the bits of paint that get stuck in it, you know, maybe through a bit of paper or something like that, and then put it back into your jar to reuse it at a later date. But you can basically make this last for a very, very long time indeed. The Rustins is absolutely excellent at that stubborn stuff, but again, like I say, once you've used it, it's gone. But in both of these cases, you can basically, you know, have a tap running to aid you with, you know, washing away everything, and you won't make a big old mess. And you know, down the sink, lots of water, as my chemistry teacher used to say, with our solvents, and that's always a very good idea. Make sure you're wearing gloves as well when you do all this kind of stuff, because it's, you know, this stuff isn't nice to your skin. And you know, there's a reason why it has the hazard labels on the back, so always read what the labels are actually telling you. Now, what about plastic miniatures? So plastic miniatures are a bit more delicate than metal miniatures, but you can use methylated spirits to strip them. But my recommendation is you don't let it soak for anywhere near as long. So this is an example I have here is a squat that I bought some years ago with the intention to building like a squat troop or something like that, and now I'm turning them into a kill team. And this squat is a converted squat that has the arms from Mark VI Space Marine set that Games Workshop did about 1988 or something, and also I added on a iridium carbine from a more recent Skitarii set as basically a test to see whether the different plastics through the eras, you know, reacted to the methylated spirits or not. And basically what happens is that the plastic does have some properties of it taken away. It becomes a little bit chalkier and maybe a little tacky sometimes if you leave it for too long. So basically, take that plastic miniature and let it soak in the methylated spirits for say 20 minutes or so, then scrub with your toothbrush, then let it soak for another 20 minutes, then scrub with your toothbrush again, and you should find you'll get something that's reasonably well done, like this guy. Now this guy, as you can see, same sort of problems again. Wherever there was the glue and it's oxygenated up the mini, you've got basically an area where the paint's stuck, like on his foot. And also you're seeing on his face, for whatever reason, that paint just isn't coming off. And I think it's because it's not actually acrylic paint, it's actually a humbrol paint, so it's an enamel, and that won't come off with the kinds of solvents that you can use on a plastic miniature. I mean, it will come off probably with acetone, maybe on a cotton bud, but you run the risk of damaging the miniature if you do that. So I think I can probably successfully paint over that with the white and nobody would really notice. It'll be just fine. You'll hear people talk about using something called a sonicator or a jewellery cleaning bath. I actually do have one of those, and people will rave about it and say it does actually save you a bunch of time and all that kind of stuff. I find that they don't really save you much time at all, and I was quite disappointed. I thought that there would be some magic results, having used sonicators my time as a chemistry student and used them predominantly to break things down. I found that the results really weren't that different to just letting them soak overnight, so I was like, oh well, it's way less effort. Also, what you'll find as well if you use a sonicator as well is that it will get quite warm, and if you're using that for plastic, then that has an additional effect to the plastic, so you know, not so good there. So I would say you don't really need a sonicator, just a soak will do the job just as well. It really doesn't make that much difference. So what about resin miniatures? So resin miniatures are a lot more delicate than plastic miniatures and metal miniatures, and so stripping them is it's a scary task, to be perfectly honest. I would really like to buy some Primarks, for example, from Forge World, but I'm not prepared to pay that kind of price. But there are several of them on eBay for a lot less that haven't been so well painted, and I would very much like to buy those miniatures and strip them, but I'm scared about actually whether you would actually get good results when you strip them. So what can you use to strip resin miniatures? So my wife is a model horse aficionado, and she strips model horses all the time and recoats and refinishes them. And a lot of these horses are resin, and she will use something called Dettol. And Dettol is basically an antiseptic available in the UK, and it has an active ingredient within it, 4%, whatever that chemical name is, and that is basically ultimately what does the job in terms of taking the paint off miniatures. The thing about Dettol is it's very gloopy and thick stuff. If you put a plastic miniature in it, it'll float. And so what you have to do is probably put it into a Ziploc bag and then put the miniature in the Ziploc bag and then just massage a bit around the mini in that Ziploc bag with the Dettol to let it get and soak on all the sides of the actual miniature. Similar to the process that we would use for our plastics is, you know, let it soak for 20-30 minutes, take it out and give it a scrub. Now when you scrub, take your toothbrush, dip it into the Dettol and scrub with the Dettol. Don't let water go anywhere near the Dettol, otherwise you end up with a massive gloopy mess. Dettol also will dissolve the paint. It'll actually bring the paint into itself, and so again, once you've used it, that's it. You're not going to be able to reuse it again, and Dettol is not really all that cheap, to be perfectly honest. I have an example here where I actually used Dettol to strip this plastic, and you can see that the results are actually not too bad, but the amount of effort I put into getting this far versus using the methylated spirits was considerably more. This was, you know, several scrubs. And also what I find with the Dettol is it does seem to affect the plastic a little more than the methylated spirits does. Not to any kind of detriment, I don't think, but certainly there's definitely some effect going on there, which would lead me to believe that, you know, don't let it soak for too long, otherwise you might actually, you know, damage something. Dettol's a right old messy mess though, so that's the other reason why I don't like it. So what you'll find is when you're scrubbing away with your toothbrush is you'll find actually a lot of the paint will actually go into the toothbrush as you're doing that. And then you're like, well, how the hell did I again subsequently get the paint off my toothbrush? Because if I use water, it'll be a massive gloopy mess. Well, you can actually use like a white spirit or even a methylated spirits to actually help you do that. So have some of that on the side to sort of dip in there and clear out. But when you do that, do make sure you then thoroughly wash that brush, dry it, then dip it back in the Dettol again before you start scrubbing away again. And eventually you'll be able to scrub, get all the Dettol off, and then you can use something like an maybe a vodka even, or a methylated spirits, and give that plastic or resin a quick dip in that stuff to basically take the actual Dettol, the surface Dettol off, so that you can get most of it off, and then you can then scrub the remaining bits off with water and you won't have a massive gloopy mess. But you really do have to literally just dip it in if you're going to do that to help you basically get that stuff off. That seems to actually work. Isopropyl alcohol or alcohol is probably less harsh than the methylated spirits for doing that, and will actually do a reasonably good job at taking the Dettol away. Also, I love the smell of Dettol. Your minis will smell of Dettol if you use Dettol, so that's the other disadvantage. So maybe you actually like it, I don't know, but it does smell like, you know, hospitals used to smell when they disinfected everything. Anyway, so that's how you basically go about stripping your miniatures. So in short, methylated spirits is what you want to use for your metals and your plastics. If you've got some stubborn stuff on your metal miniatures, then cellulose thinners like Rustin cellulose thinners will help you. And if you're talking about resins, then Dettol is probably your go-to stuff, certainly in the UK. Thanks very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video today. If you do like it, please say so, comment and subscribe. Catch you next time.